January 17, 1940. Dawn rises reluctantly over the North Sea, a weak gray light breaking against low clouds that hang like wet wool. The wind carries the metallic taste of salt and cold iron, and the engines of a lone British Blenheim MKF growl through the winter air. Inside the rear turret, the young gunner steadies his gloved hands on the handles of his .303 Brownings, listening to the steady, monotonous vibration that has accompanied him through countless patrol hours. Below him, the world is empty. Above him, the world is waiting. And he does not know that within the next few minutes he will adopt a tactic so reckless, so unorthodox, that it will be remembered long after the men who lived it have fallen silent. The aircraft moves into its patrol line, tracing a long arc south of the Dogger Bank. To the crew, the morning feels like countless others, cold, gray, and uneventful. But a ripple in the clouds to the east hints otherwise. In that distortion of vapor lies the beginning of a battle that will test an idea almost no one had dared speak aloud, let alone act upon. That a slow, twin-engine British interceptor could outwit and outfight the Luftwaffe's swift and predatory Messerschmitt Bf 109. For weeks, intelligence officers warned of increasing German reconnaissance flights probing RAF defenses. The Blenheim crews knew the pattern. German single-seat fighters rarely flew alone, and they rarely passed up a target when they found one. The British aircraft, heavier and slower, were widely dismissed as transition machines, a stopgap from peacetime that had little place in the blistering pace of 1940 air combat. Even their own pilots joked that the best defense of a Blenheim was a cloud. Yet still they flew, held aloft by necessity, duty, and the stubborn belief that they had something to contribute. As the light strengthens, the first Messerschmitt breaks through the cloud cover like a blade sliding from a sheath. Then another, and another. Soon, a loose formation of Bf 109s fans out behind the British aircraft, their sleek noses tilting in predatory alignment. The German pilots believe they have found easy prey. Their intelligence briefings had been explicit. The Blenheim's rear turret is its only real defense. Strike from below or above and to the side, and it will fall without meaningful resistance. Many of these pilots expect an effortless victory. Imagining British crews already nervously casting glances behind them, but this Blenheim's rear gunner, Sergeant Harold Whitmore, is already thinking of a tactic that defies both training and instinct. He had observed, during earlier sorties, a simple pattern in Luftwaffe behavior. German pilots closed in with calculated aggression, rarely assuming that the British would do anything but attempt escape through dive or cloud. Whitmore had noticed that when his aircraft entered a shallow descending turn, the Germans adjusted cautiously, often underestimating how quickly the Blenheim could reposition its turret arc. His mind returns to those earlier encounters now, and he realizes that their mistake can be turned into his opportunity. The whistle of air passing the turret. Glass grows sharper. The distant shapes of the Messerschmitt swell. The pilot calls out the approach angle, not an order, but confirmation that the sky is thickening with danger. Whitmore's fingers tighten. He senses the Germans preparing their familiar ballet. One distracts, two strike, and the British crew becomes names on a memorial list. He knows their expectation, that the Blenheim will continue straight and level long enough for them to line up a perfect firing pass. But he does not intend to give them a perfect anything. He does next will be described later by surviving crew members and recorded by RAF Combat. Reports with phrases like highly unorthodox, borderline, suicidal, and impossible to replicate, under standard doctrine. And yet, on that icy morning, instinct and resolve converge into a single decision. He yells to the pilot through the intercom short. Sharp words carried by static, and the Blenheim abruptly rolls left into a sharp, descending spiral. This is the opposite of every defensive tactic the crew has been taught. It presents the turret momentarily broadside, an exposed target. It risks structural strain. It bleeds altitude rapidly, and it drags the aircraft into the kill zone of German cannons. But it brings one decisive advantage. It pulls the trailing Messerschmitts into a funnel, compressing their attack lanes into a narrow corridor directly astern. In other words, Whitmore turns the entire aircraft into a trap. The German pilots, confident in their speed advantage, tighten formation to match the Blenheim's unusual maneuver. They believe the British crew is panicking. They assume the descending roll is the prelude to a desperate dive for cloud cover. One pilot later recorded in his logbook, recovered after the war, that he had believed the enemy to be disoriented, without discipline, attempting escape. What they do not realize is that Whitmore's turret is silently tracking them, his guns aligning before they even finish adjusting their attack curve. The first 109 enters perfect range. Whitmore squeezes the trigger. The Brownings erupt out to historians. The sound of a Browning .303 from a WWII aircraft carries a symbolic quality. It's rhythmic. Staccato clatter often associated with the early war Royal Air Force, underpowered, undermanned, but determined. In this script, the 303s will serve as the recurring symbol, representing not just firepower, but the stubborn resilience of a democratic nation refusing to yield to a newer, faster war machine. Every round is a reminder of Britain's industrial limitations and its moral resolve. The bullet stitched through the data. First 109's engine cowling. Flames burst outward. The fighter falls away. The second 109 close behind overcorrects. Its pilot attempts to roll out of the tightening funnel, but Whitmore's turret snaps toward it with ferocious precision. Another burst, another fall of black smoke dot in the German formation. Expectation collapses into disbelief. The pilots had assumed that a Blenheim under pressure would break apart, not become more coordinated. Doctrine had failed them. Training had failed them. Even the technological edge, their greatest pride, seemed suddenly insufficient. Within seconds, the air is alive with ash, tracers, and the metallic rippling of gunfire over the roar of engines. Whitmore does not pause. He calculates distances and lead angles with instinct sharpened by hours of uneventful patrols. The descending spiral continues, compressing the German formation tighter and tighter behind the British aircraft. One after another, the pursuing fighters slip into the turret's narrow but deadly cone. The official RAF report, filed later that morning, noted dryly, enemy aircraft appeared to persist in tail pursuit, allowing multiple firing solutions to be obtained. This understatement conceals the violent truth. Whitmore's tactic forced the Germans into a predictable kill lane, turning the Blenheim's disadvantage into an ambush. A third Messerschmitt spirals down in flames. Then a fourth, in less time than it takes to recite the Lord's Prayer. 6 enemy fighters are falling into the cold sea. Still the others persist, driven by discipline, adrenaline, and the stubborn belief that the Blenheim must already be damaged beyond repair. The German pilots cannot accept that a lumbering British aircraft is outmaneuvering them. One Luftwaffe squadron leader, writing months later, recalled that early 1940 was full of unexpected lessons delivered by an enemy who did not seem to know he was already defeated. But Whitmore knows something they do not. He is no longer waiting for them to attack. He is hunting them. The spiral tightens. Altitude drops. The horizon tilts violently. Frost streaks across the turret glass. Whitmore continues to fire in short, disciplined bursts, preserving ammunition while maximizing accuracy. The 5th minute of combat begins, though to the men inside the Blenheim, time has dissolved into pure motion. A 7th 109 enters. His sights and evaporates under the precision of twin Brownings. An 8th attempts a vertical climb, but the Blenheim's unexpected downward corkscrew forces the fighter back into the turret arc. Another burst. Another plume of smoke. The pattern is now unmistakable. The German fighters were trained to exploit predictable prey. Instead, they are caught in the geometry of a tactic that defies their experience. The British turret, normally a final gesture of resistance, has become the centerpiece of an evolving ambush. A 9th, 10th, and 11th Messerschmitt fall in quick succession, torn apart by fire from an aircraft they believed hopelessly obsolete. 4 minutes have passed. The 12th and final, 109 tries to break away, peeling off to the right in a desperate attempt to escape the gravitational pull of the British gunner's trap. But Whitmore reads the angle, leads his target, and fires his longest burst yet. Sparks flare across the enemy fuselage. Smoke trails. The fighter slips sideways, then nosedives into the ocean. Silence returns, save for the ragged breathing of the Blenheim crew and the steady drone of their engines. The spiraling descent ends. The aircraft rights itself, battered but intact. The turret is hot to the touch. The ammunition belts hang limp and spent. 12 BF-109s lie below. Scattered across the cold waters, 12 machines of the strongest air force in Europe. Claimed by a tactic devised in a split second by a man who simply refused to die. The symbolic clatter of the Brownings fades into the hum of engines as the crew withdraws from the battle zone. In that fading sound lies the contrast between expectation and outcome. The Germans expected a brief hunt. The British expected a desperate fight for survival. What occurred was a transformation in aerial doctrine that neither side had foreseen. In the days that followed, RAF analysts studied Whitmore's after-action account with near disbelief. They cross-referenced ammunition expenditure data, enemy wreckage analyses, and corroborating reports from signal intercepts. Everything aligned. The kills were not exaggerated. The tactic, though dangerous, was real. What made this moment matter was not just the number of enemy aircraft destroyed. It was the revelation that a rear-facing weapon on a slow, twin-engine machine could dominate faster opponents when used with audacity and tactical creativity. Whitmore had shown that the psychological assumption of superiority could be turned against the aggressor. His maneuver forced the Luftwaffe to reconsider tail pursuits against turreted aircraft, leading to adjustments in attack doctrine noted in German flight training manuals as early as mid-1940. The transformation extended beyond tactical evolution. For British crews still reeling from early war losses, Whitmore's actions provided a powerful emotional counterpoint to fear and inevitability. His success became a reminder that war was not purely a contest of machines. It was a contest of imagination, will, and the ability to challenge assumptions under mortal threat. The Brownings, once merely defensive fixtures, gained symbolic significance across the service. Their sound, the steady democratic rhythm of mass-produced British manufacturing, became the heartbeat of defiance. Each weapon had been assembled in factories where men and women labored relentlessly under blackout conditions. Each belt of ammunition represented not just industrial capacity, but collective determination. To the Germans, the weapons were nuisances. To the British, they were lifelines. As the war continued, tales of the January engagement spread quietly between squadrons. Some dismissed it as an anomaly. Others regarded it as proof that courage could compensate for mechanical inferiority. Pilots and gunners asked instructors whether Whitmore's tactic could be taught. Most were told no. It required a constellation of conditions, precise angle, precise timing, and a gunner willing to risk everything. Many recognized that such a maneuver bordered on self-destruction. Few were willing to replicate it, and yet the lesson persisted. That unpredictability was a weapon in its own right. Years later, historians would trace a subtle but meaningful shift in RAF doctrine back to this moment. The idea that a slow aircraft could be used aggressively, not just defensively, influenced thinking in Coastal Command and Bomber Command. It contributed to evolving ideas about flexible gun positions, turret-firing arcs, and multi-crew coordination. It helped shape understanding of morale, initiative, and psychological warfare in the air. For the Luftwaffe, the encounter became an early cautionary tale. Reports submitted by surviving German pilots, those who managed to break away before destruction, described frustration, confusion, and a stunned recognition that British crews were not abiding by expected patterns. As one German account noted, the enemy turned their weakness into a weapon. In this reversal lies the enduring emotional contrast of the era. The Axis powers, buoyed by early victories, expected predictability and surrender. The Allies, often under-equipped and outmatched, cultivated ingenuity born of necessity. When these expectations collided, history tilted. The symbolic Brownings appear again in the epilogue of Whitmore's story. After the war, when veterans gathered to reflect on the chaotic years of aerial combat, some spoke not of engines or armor, but of the sound that had defined their struggle. The clatter of the 303s had represented home, factory floors, the steady resolve of a nation unwilling to bow. It was the voice of a free people defending their skies with both limited tools and limitless determination. Whitmore himself rarely spoke publicly of the engagement. Those who knew him said he regarded the event with humility, attributing survival to chance as much as skill. Yet the record remains. In 4 minutes of violent clarity, he changed the rhythm of early war air combat. And as this script closes, we return to the symbolic sound that framed the battle, the Browning's distinctive cry, echoing across cold air. It is a sound tied to a larger truth, that freedom is often defended not by perfect machines or flawless plans, but by individuals willing to defy expectation, to act with courage when logic suggests surrender, and to discover in the direst moment a new way of fighting. The sea eventually swallowed the wreckage of 12 fallen fighters. The sky returned to gray silence. But the idea born that morning did not sink with them. It endured, shaping doctrine, memory, and belief. It whispered into the ears of future airmen that even in the darkest hours of conflict, innovation can rise from fear, resilience can rise from desperation, and freedom can rise from the steady, resolute rhythm of 2 Browning .303s fired by a gunner who refused to be prey.